Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Seattle University's Conversations program. Tonight, we present a mayoral debate, a discussion between Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell, now seeking a second term, and Katie Wilson, the challenger, running for public office for the first time. I want to thank you both so much for being here. Really appreciate the time. I know you've been out at a lot of these kinds of events, so thank you so much for joining us. I'm Joni Balter, professional in residence here at Seattle University in the Department of Public Affairs and Nonprofit Leadership.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Daniels from KOMO TV. We're going to go for a more relaxed setting here tonight, try to have a conversation, but also keep the candidates on some time restrictions as we try to plow through a bunch of different subjects ranging from housing to affordability to public safety and President Trump. We'll give you the standard 60 seconds to answer a question, but there will be a similar question to the other candidate and you'll have 60 seconds. Now, if you feel like you'd like to respond to your opponent, this is key. Wiggle your pen, wiggle your finger, and we'll give you another 30 seconds to respond to what the other candidate just had to say. And later on in the debate, we'll have a few individual questions, and the same rules will apply. Now, there is one thing we'd like to lay the groundwork on now, and the rules to please avoid acronyms when you're discussing certain things. For instance, KCRHA is the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. Please refer to it as such as we go forward.
Seated next to me is Diego Borromeo, Seattle University's senior, majoring in public affairs, environmental studies, and international studies. He joins us in the questioning tonight. And since we are coming to you from the Seattle U campus, Diego, bringing a student perspective, leads us off. Take it away, Diego.
All right. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Joni, and I'm excited to start us off. So, Mayor Harrell, as a Seattle University student and a Washington native, I have seen the fentanyl crisis evolve into what it is now. We have stay-out-of-drug areas barring repeat offenders from entering certain parts of the city, and we also have the care team comprised of civilian crisis responders who go out on certain drug calls. However, people are still openly using drugs on Seattle streets and right along our campus. What would, or even could you do, could your current administration do to address the public drug use further?
Yeah, first, Diego, thank everyone for being here. So this is a health crisis, and we have the intersectionality between a health crisis and a public safety approach. So the first thing we have to keep everyone is safe. And so if they are harming themselves and killing themselves, our first approach will always be to treat them. And so you've seen under our administration, we've tripled our investments in this space. We've reduced fentanyl deaths by nearly 30%. And that's why we created the care department, the Community Assistance Response and Engagement Department.
See how that works?
To make sure that we're not doing a militarized approach, but we're treating them. And so we're the first city in the country to allow our first responders to administer buprenorphine as an example. At the same time, I want all of the students safe, and so many people will commit crimes, and so we do have to be tough in terms of a public safety approach as well, and that's the intersectionality that our administration has done, and that fentanyl ordinance is, again, it's a best practice. It's when we actually drafted is to make sure that we're doing it in a strong way, but in an effective and a compassionate way.
Thank you, Mayor Harrell. Now, Ms. Wilson, why should voters pick you to handle this crisis? In other words, if you are elected as mayor, would you want to continue or undo our existing protocols? And if so, what would you replace them with?
Yeah, this is a great question. And you know, the first thing I'll say, I'm a big supporter of the CARE team, which hopefully I can use an acronym since we've explained it once, but our alternative response team. I was really disturbed to read in the Seattle Times just in the past week that the Seattle Police Department has not been basically allowing the CARE team to exercise their full jurisdiction, has not been calling them in to calls where they are the appropriate responders. So this is very disturbing, and you know, as mayor, I will absolutely be working with SPD to make sure that they are allowing the CARE team their full latitude of response, and also to make sure that the CARE team can respond without police when appropriate so that our police can focus on policing. I would say about the fentanyl crisis, I mean, fentanyl is very different from other drugs, and in addition to treatment, we also need to make sure that to the extent that this overlaps with the homelessness crisis, and we're talking about people who are also often unsheltered, that we actually have the emergency housing and shelter for them to go into, because you're not going to be able to successfully treat someone who is addicted unless they have that stability. And that's another area where we are sorely lacking in emergency housing and shelter. And unfortunately, the current administration has failed to expand emergency housing and shelter in the way that is absolutely necessary to combat the drug crisis as well.
I think what my opponent's referring to is Chief Barton, who's head of the care department, and Chief Barnes, who's head of the police department. Both of them have the same boss. It's Natalie Walton Anderson, who's a former U.S. attorney and city attorney and prosecutor. And what we've tried to demonstrate in our administration is we're open and transparent when we have issues. And remember, modern policing, as we see it, has been going on for decades and decades. We started the care department from scratch. So naturally, there's going to be some tension in these groups, and I encourage them to openly talk about them. I put them all in a room, we work out the details, and I have to remind folks that a lot of the conditions that the work that CARE is doing is a negotiated labor condition. So you just can't take it from the police department. And I think we'll be pleased to know that these negotiations have gone successfully. CARE will expand. We will, at a minimum, double CARE. And those two chiefs are actually working well together. But we want to be open and transparent with some of these issues, and I think the public at the end of the day has an appreciation for that kind of transparency.
All right, moving on. The question is for you, Katie. Part of the job of mayor is to be the recruiter in chief, to bring jobs to the city. I've heard you tell people you want to find more progressive revenue, which is also code for bringing in new taxes into the city. If you're telling people they're going to be taxed over and over and over again, isn't there an incentive for people and small businesses to just pick up and take their business to Bellevue?
Great question. And I think the first thing to point out is that here in Washington State, we have the second most regressive tax system in the country, right? So that means that we don't clap for that. And that means that lower and middle income households are paying far more of their income in state and local taxes than the wealthiest households. So we have some rebalancing to do. So this is why we're talking about progressive taxes, because we don't want to keep layering taxes on the working folks who are already paying too much. That's why I'm proud to have led in designing and passing the Jumpstart Payroll Expense Tax, which is our city's landmark tax on wealthy corporations. It's allowed our current mayor to balance the budget for the last 4 years. And at the same time, it's also true that we want jobs in Seattle, right? We want world-class companies to locate here. In order to have a thriving city, we need great jobs. And there is a danger in having a tax environment in Seattle that is radically different from in neighboring jurisdictions, right? Ideally, we would be doing a lot more progressive taxation at the state level. And so, we need a balanced approach, but we also need new revenue in order to actually fund the goods and services we all depend on, especially in the context of threatened cuts, for example, to HUD funding, right, which is something I think needs more discussion, right?
Housing and urban development.
Thank you, housing and urban development, right? Threatening to push more people into homelessness. So I do support new progressive taxes. I support a local capital gains tax, and I think there are some other options that the city can work on. But yeah, this is an important subject, and it needs a lot of attention focused on it so we can do this in an intelligent way.
And I will flip that around to you, Mayor, as we are asking the redirects here on the same subject matter, since we are talking about jobs moving to the east side.
Redirect sounds so official, like a lawyer.
The waterfront project, I think a lot of people could acknowledge, has started, and it's nice and it's beautiful, and it started well before you were mayor. The South Lake Union construction has been years in the making. So the question is, why haven't you been able to get people back into the heart of downtown, into the retail core, and back into office space?
Well, first of all, the data would suggest in terms of foot traffic, we are almost at 2019 levels pre-COVID. In terms of tourism, foot traffic, hotel occupancy, we're off the charts in terms of trending in the right direction. I think what you're talking about is businesses where we have
the retail core.
Sure. And I have to, in all due respect, sort of suggest to my opponent that we are all in for progressive taxes. If you look at the B&O tax we propose, we are taxing the big corporations, and we're giving 90% of small businesses a tax break. But the fact is if I have a charter responsibility to make sure that you all have jobs, and whether you're in arts or culture or high tech or biotech or maritime, and look at the fact that because of tax policy, we lost 10,000 jobs right to Bellevue. And in that sector, which is 40% of our sector in the high tech, there were 46,000 layoffs. So what we're doing is we're reinventing downtown. We have to have experiential activity, music, dog parks, daycare, buskers, art, culture. And we have to make it an experiential activity because the new downtown, because of e-commerce, is going to be a new downtown. And that's what our plans have done. If you go down to Triple Door, it's a beautiful arts and restaurants. We're going to build housing on top, and that's where the new downtown will go. Could I do that in 3.5 years? Of course not. I had to modify the comp plan, modifying the zoning schemes.
Comprehensive plan.
The comprehensive plan,
I'll just
the
do it
zoning
all night, it'll
scheme.
be great.
And we had to make sure that we're cutting through red tape. So that's what our new downtown will be. And if you look at the Pike Place Market, the Overlook Park, the waterfront, we're going to have the best pedestrian experience in the country in terms of downtown and tying it into our market.
Well, you were just mentioning B&O, business and occupation taxes. You have tried to rewrite the code here and presented that for the fall. I know that Katie, you have said you didn't give him credit for writing that legislation with Alexis Mercedes Rink, the council members. So is that a good idea, what he's talking about with the B&O taxes?
I do support that proposal, yeah. I mean, the B&O tax is an imperfect tool, and this was actually, so in 2023, I served on the Seattle Revenue Stabilization Work Group, which was basically tasked with looking at what the city's revenue options are. And I and other members of the Transit Riders Union also did a ton of research and published our own report alongside the final work group of that. And this B&O tax restructure was actually one of the options that we detailed in that report. So imperfect tool, but I definitely do support that. And I'm grateful that Councilmember Alexis Mercedes Rink really took a lead on that legislation. And I'll also say, just regarding downtown, I think that homelessness and the public safety issues there are also another big part of kind of revitalizing and the issues that we need to address. And again, coming back to the desperate need for emergency housing and shelter so that we can begin to address some of those issues.
I'm going to ask the audience, if you don't clap after every answer, we will get to way more questions. Just a thought. Mayor Harrell, on the surface, things are going well in Seattle. Crime is down. The new waterfront has opened. People seem to really, really like the waterfront. The population's growing. But you are the underdog in this race. So I want to ask you why. Why are voters so dissatisfied?
Well, number one, we have a maniac as our president, number one. And we should rightfully want change. We should rightfully want to fight. We should rightfully want to protect immigrant and refugees and LGBTQ plus neighbors and everyone that is consistent with our values of being a loving community. And I have been elected 4 times in this city. And I recognize I was a champion on the council for the racial profiling, anti-racial profiling law, the ban the box legislation. I can go down the list of climate change legislation, which is groundbreaking. But people want to make sure that they have a change agent. And when I talk about my mother being incarcerated in a concentration camp because of a presidential executive order, you don't think that was my mother. You don't think I'm motivated to fight this tyrannical person in office? When my father came from the segregated, racist Jim Crow South to come to Seattle, and I just lived 6 blocks from here, you don't think I'm motivated to protect everyone in this city? I get up every day thinking about this fight, but people want to be convinced that this person who's been in power for 16 years is not siding with the corporations. And if you look at my background, I've been fighting these corporations my entire life. I led a class action for all of the women against the Boeing Company. I led a class action for all of the African Americans against the Boeing Company. I've sued the city of Seattle. I've sued the city of Seattle for employment discrimination. That's my life story. And the people want to be assured that they have that kind of fighter in the executive, not someone just pretends to be. And I'm not suggesting that is my opponent, but they want to know they have the real deal. And that's why I've been elected 4 times, and that's why I hope to get a second term to keep this fight going.
Ms. Wilson, the city of Seattle employs nearly 14,000 people across roughly 40 departments, offices, and commissions. What in your background prepares you to manage a city of this size and complexity?
Great question. Am I allowed to rebut what he said before?
You are?
Rebut my life story? I'm all ears.
Sorry,
We offered the rebuttal, so I will.
Okay,
And then
I
you'll
was all
come back
gearing up
to
for this.
this
So
one,
first of all,
and
I just want to note that those corporations are spending an awful lot of money trying to get you reelected, so they must be seeing something that they like.
Audience, we really do aim for a respectful discussion here. And if you're clapping each time they speak, it cuts off our time to get to what we're trying to do.
I'll
So please.
keep this short. So the other thing is, you asked why, conversely, why I did so well in the primary. And the mayor talked about Trump. And of course, that's a factor. But I think there's a reason why a lot of voters perceive our mayor as out of touch. Because what he didn't mention is that things are not okay. You can talk about crime statistics. But the fact is that we are facing an affordability crisis. We are facing an affordability crisis and a homelessness crisis that is worse than it has ever been before. More people have died outside in the last 4 years than in any term previous in our city's history. And not just the poorest people, but middle-income people, middle-class people, families are struggling to survive in this city. Families like mine are moving out because they cannot afford to live here. That is why people are inspired by my campaign, because I am talking about the issues that affect them every day. Sorry, I got him.
Okay, and back to my
Okay.
fascinating question a few minutes ago about your experience to manage a complex city, 14,000 employees.
Absolutely. So a few things to say here. First, a little level setting, right? People come into the mayor's office from all directions. Seattle had a 3-term mayor once, Charlie Royer. He was a news reporter before he stepped into the mayor's office. Our current mayor, other mayors before him, have come in from council offices, managing a few people, right? Now, that's not to say that experience is not important, but there are a variety of experiences that are relevant to this position. The experience that I have, 14 years, building and managing large multi-partner coalitions to win transformative victories that benefit people across our region every single day, that is relevant experience. And also, I know that I don't have all the experience, right? And it's about assembling that team. And so I will be bringing with me into City Hall people with deep experience in the executive branch. Maybe you'll even see a couple people from Mayor Harrell's office, I don't know. And people with deep management experience, right? So it's about assembling that team. And I have every confidence, and I'm very excited about that, because there are so many people in the city who are passionate, who are competent, and who have that deep experience. And together, it's about keeping everyone oriented toward a common vision and motivated, and assembling teams and keeping them oriented and motivated toward a common vision is exactly what I have spent my career doing.
All right. Ms. Wilson, earlier today, we heard Mayor Harrell outline his executive orders for dealing with the possible arrival of federal agents in Seattle. What is your plan for dealing with the federal government if the president sends the National Guard into the city?
Yeah, this is such an important question, and I know there's a lot of anxiety about this right now for everyone, but especially in immigrant communities, and I fully support those executive orders. This is really about being unified. Trump picks on the weak, and the more that we can show that we are unified, the city, the state, the county, and also with all community organizations in Seattle, right? So that if he does send people in, we are showing that we are strong. And ideally, it doesn't get that far, right? We fight in the courts. The other thing I'll say is that it's important to be prepared and to have our own house in order. So I was disturbed to see the surveillance legislation that the mayor proposed and the council passed, which was opposed for good reasons by immigrant rights groups and by legislators, because they know that that technology has not been shown to be meaningfully secured. And that data is not at City Hall on a server, right? It's in the cloud in other states that don't have the kind of protections we have here. And there was a recent report just in the last couple of days that the Seattle Police Department has been fulfilling public records requests from ICE. I don't know if I have to actually spell that acronym out. Much faster than it has been fulfilling public records requests from journalists. That is a problem. Why is that happening?
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Now, Mayor Harrell, for the people who don't know, what exactly are your executive orders, and what is your plan if the possible use of federal agents is found in our city?
Sure. There's a few misleading facts in my opponent's statement. I won't address that. I'll just answer your question. Number one is we're the first city to actually ban masks in insignia where people are not branded and they're doing arrests, okay? And we're taking a chance to push this law because we think that, number one, due process is violated, but number two, it's very frightening for everyone to see someone that's unmarked and with a mask doing this, number one. Number two, we're prohibiting any types of ICE raids, and staging for ice raids on city property. Number 3, we're making it very clear to our police department to remove ambiguity as to what will occur from our officers. They will not cooperate under the Keep Washington Working Act, making it crystal clear what they should or should not do. We want you to be loud. We want you to be organized. We want you to be safe. And so we're also working with community-based organizations to make sure how we could use our voice, but we don't want to fall for the bait. I don't want any of you injured when using your voice. And so part of the executive order makes sure is we are protesting under your First Amendment rights the right way and the strong way. We'll continue to do FOIA requests, or what we'll call State Disclosure, Freedom of Information Act requests and state disclosure requests, to find out from the Trump, what are they doing? Where are they playing chess? Because one thing Trump does is he tries to keep you on your heel. And last, we put in legal services money. I increased the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, OIRA, so I do it after. Their budget by 70%, making sure that there are legal funds for the community-based organizations and the people most affected. Together, and I have Bob Ferguson, who endorses my reelection, the Attorney General Nick Brown, who endorses my reelection, Senator Cantwell and others. We are working together. We are joined to fight for our values. And that was the letter I wrote to the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. By the way, we know the law here. I'm a trained attorney. We know the law here, and we know our values here. So united, we have a plan, and I'm sharing this with other mayors in different cities as well so they can see what we're doing here.
Follow on?
Yeah, no, I'm very glad to hear that the city is now filing FOIA requests. That's something that I've been calling for in debate after debate and is in my platform. This is the first I've heard that the city's doing it, so I'm really glad. And since I have an audience with the mayor right now, I'm gonna propose another suggestion, which is that Seattle should cancel its Joint Terrorism Task Force partnership with the FBI. So there's a few cities that have done that because that can be weaponized to gather information and crack down on dissent. This is something I just read about in the past week or so, so another thing to look into.
Okay. Randomly, Ms. Wilson, let's say an earthquake strikes the region. You're the new mayor. What 3 specific steps would you take upon feeling the shaking, the first shaking?
That's a great question. I'd probably make some phone calls.
To whom?
So I know we have really strong emergency management protocols in Seattle and King County. So I would probably call the person who is the head of those efforts. Probably be good to call the governor, and probably be good to call the police chief. Yeah.
Mayoral, same question. First of all, is Seattle prepared for an earthquake? And what 3 steps would you take upon the first tremor?
Well, first thing, you shouldn't make calls because you realize the wireless services may be down as well during a major earthquake. You have to know the protocols in Office of Emergency Management. So the first thing, we practice this all the time, not just for an earthquake, but for a fire, for a king flood. And so there are protocols in place, and we actually practice this in terms of where even I'm supposed to be, because I may be in my home, I may be in the office. And so there's strict protocols in place. We practice it all the time. And our Mayor Curry, our Office of Emergency Management Director, is very good at doing this. So we have an emergency team, we have a command center, we bring in the fire chief, the police chief, SDOT director, because we have to make sure people can get from to and from. We have all of our first responders, and I will typically go to the Office of Emergency Management. I will be there physically as the commander and staff, and quite frankly, that's where experience matters. This is not a learning curve stuff we're dealing with, my friends. Even with the National Guards coming here, experience matters. This is not a learning edge. You don't start making calls or guessing what you do. And again,
is Seattle prepared for an earthquake?
Yes. Yes, we are prepared. And by the way, the fires down in Los Angeles that occurred, one of the first things we did is make sure, even for dreaded fires, are we resilient in terms of big fires like that? We don't have some of the same vulnerabilities there, but we went through a protocol a training session for fires, floods, earthquakes, other types of natural disasters.
Can I have a quick?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just very briefly, I just want to say that I'm not entirely sure that we are prepared for an earthquake. As a renter, I happen to know that there are hundreds of unreinforced brick masonry buildings still in the city. There's a big list. I've looked up my apartment building on that list, which are not earthquake safe. And so there are a lot of buildings in the city that are actually in danger of becoming rubble in an earthquake. That's a big kind of infrastructure problem, but that's the kind of thing that we do need to be looking ahead and figuring out how to solve.
Okay. Mayor Harrell, I have a homelessness question for you. During the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, we saw encampment sweeps and other short-term fixes that made Soto look cleaner for visitors. But shortly after, the same issues reappeared. What can we expect for FIFA next year if you remain mayor? And how will your administration ensure that changes aren't just short-term and cosmetic?
Yeah.
And how would you measure success?
Yeah, and just to correct the record, all of the encampment removals and work we did before the All-Star Games were already scheduled. So it wasn't like, let's clean up the house when people come here. So let's make that very clear. Number two, we have to realize how serious the homelessness problem is. I mean, people could giggle if they want. 18% of Americans are homeless. This is almost 1 million people. Homelessness has gone up in the country, in the state, in the county, in the city. This is a crisis. So what we're doing is, again, remember the model that I inherited is the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. So now I'll say KCRHA. We pay into it, $120 million. We need regional support because 70% of the people we're treating here in Seattle did not become unhoused in Seattle. They're coming from other jurisdictions and they put no money into the operating account for this. 85% of the tiny homes in the entire county are in Seattle. 63% of all the emergency shelter in the county are in Seattle. So the answer has to be a firm regional approach, and you see me right now have a motion in front of the KCRHA to make sure they are regionalized. And if they don't regionalize, I will terminate that agreement because we are committed to sheltering everyone that needs shelter. I don't want anyone to die in a tent or in a tiny home. And a best practice is permanent supportive housing, PSH.
And we need to cut it off.
So that's our approach, and we think that's the humane and the best practice approach.
Now,
Same question?
Now, Ms. Wilson, how would you handle up cleaning the city for the World Cup while avoiding temporary cleanups?
With respect, people are dying right now, and they're dying without even a tent. This is a very, very important question. And I heard the mayor basically try to pass the buck and talk about how nationally homelessness rates are high and how we need a regional solution and other cities need to do more. The fact is that our rates of unsheltered homelessness here in Seattle, they've been called a national outlier by the Brookings Institution. We have more people unsheltered in the Seattle area than in New York City. That is failure. The mayor came into office promising to build 2,000 units of emergency housing and shelter in his first year. He did not, and we have lost shelter capacity every single year that he has been in office, and we have thousands more people sleeping outside today than we did 4 years ago. That is failure. It's going to be very important in the first 6 months of next year, leading up to the World Cup Games, that we address homelessness in the downtown core and adjacent neighborhoods in a way that does not simply push people out. That means opening shelter rapidly. That means tiny house villages, micro-modular shelter. That means exploring ways that we can get people into some of the vacant units across the affordable housing sector. We need to be creative about it. We need to partner with the Downtown Seattle Association. We need to partner with nonprofits, with faith leaders. And I believe that we can do that. I believe we can get hundreds of people who are currently sleeping outside downtown into shelter with the services that they need to be successful there so that we are not merely pushing the problem, pushing human beings into the shadows.
Thank you.
So if I could just quickly refute some of the untrue facts that my opponent said. Number one, you look down at Los Angeles, they have 47,000 people that are unsheltered homeless. You look down at Portland, they have 6,300. One thing I don't do is pass the buck, but the other thing I don't do is blame other people. My wife, who's here, who, by the way, is one of your trustees here at Seattle University, we've been in this space for 30 years fighting for people. She used to be the CEO of United Way. We will do everything possible. The fact of the matter is people are slipping through the cracks. And if you look at our investment strategy, we are doing the right thing and will continue to do the right thing. That's why we passed a $1 billion housing levy to make sure that we're producing affordable housing for you, which includes 9,000 people staying in their homes so they don't become homeless. So we have smart strategies and compassion strategies, and we'll continue to do so. But we don't blame other people. We've been doing this work. My opponent has 0 housing experience. That's just the truth. That is just the absolute truth. She's done no work in this sector, and it's offensive to the people that have spent decades trying to solve this problem.
All right, so we're at the halfway mark, call it halftime of this debate, and we've got a lot of college students in the room who care about the cost of pizza. And Katie, you've talked about affordability in this race. You had an advertisement that really got some buzz for you in the primary about the cost of a slice of pizza and how that is connected to housing. But couldn't one make the argument that it is also connected to Seattle's leading efforts to raise the minimum wage, which was a campaign that you were a part of?
So first of all, I want to clarify, since the mayor has several times said that I'm taking credit for a minimum wage campaign that I didn't lead. I did not lead the Seattle minimum wage campaign. I helped to lead campaigns in Tukwila, unincorporated King County, and Burien to raise the minimum wage to the highest in the country. I was obviously also supportive of the Seattle minimum wage campaign. So yes, and I mean, I think the pizza video that you're referring to, which I suggest everyone watch if you haven't already, it makes the argument that housing costs are a big driver of the cost of your slice of pizza. But part of that is through the minimum wage, right? So we have one of the highest minimum wages in the country, and every year it goes up with the cost of living, which is very important because we're trying to make sure that the low-wage workers in our city can ideally afford to live here. And even with our high minimum wage, most people can't actually afford to live here, so they're commuting in a long way just to work at the pizza shop, perhaps. But the argument that I was making in that video is that housing costs contribute to those increases in the minimum wage because of it is a cost of living increase. So as rents go up, our regional cost of living goes up, and that bumps up the minimum wage. And even regardless of what the minimum wage is, employers have to pay more usually than the minimum wage just to hire and retain staff, and that is because they can't afford to live here because of the high housing costs. They're having to come in, and it's hard to hire and retain people when that is the case. So basically the argument here is that housing costs contribute to high labor costs in both direct and indirect ways.
Mayor, do you agree with that? Why is the cost of pizza so high here in the Central District near Seattle University? Doesn't that also factor in with B&O taxes, business and occupation taxes, the kind of thing that you're talking about changing and putting on bigger employers?
It does. And, you know, that pizza deal was sort of ironic. Now, I was one of the lead negotiators on the minimum wage. I stand behind the minimum wage, but I also recognize that we've made it tough on small businesses, and that's exactly why not only did we propose the most progressive B&O tax to make sure that 90% of these restaurants, for example, are getting a break, we will propose legislation in Olympia such that many of the, like the grocery stores, for example, should be exempt from certain taxes, B&O taxes and other types of taxes that hurt these companies with small margins. We've also incorporated the capital access program where 700 businesses are getting money, several restaurants are getting money, and we're buying down their lease. And we also have put many restaurants in, a restaurant, Donna Moody's, for example, Marjorie's, in an ownership position through it's called the Business Community Ownership Fund. We have the Liberty Project, where we're using your students, Seattle University, at your Albert School, helping small businesses with strategic planning, access to capital, human resource management, and with the University of Washington as well. So we're doing everything possible to support these restaurants. We're not flipping up pizza and making fun of it. We're putting in the hard work to make sure these businesses could survive because they have thin margins.
Ms. Wilson, the Seattle Times says we have now effectively an oversupply of publicly funded affordable housing. Units that sometimes, that we've been reading about, cannot compete with market rate spaces. How can we avoid building the right amount of housing, but also overbuilding when current practices are leaving many public affordable housing units empty?
Yeah, I think this is such an important question, and you know, this is a crisis that we've actually known was coming for several years, and I believe that with better leadership from the mayor's office, we could have avoided this point now where we have widespread vacancies and we actually have affordable housing providers that are selling off buildings. We've lost about 1,300 units. That is a permanent loss to our affordable housing stock, and it's so expensive to build right now. It's like over $500,000 per unit. So we're talking about, in order to replace those units that have been lost, we're talking about $500 million that we just basically lost because of this crisis. So part of this is making sure that as we are funding affordable housing, we are really paying attention to the type of units that are needed and who needs them, right? And I think there's been this emphasis on just maximizing the number of units that we're building. And what that's led to is focusing our effort on building very small studio apartments at the kind of 50.
Both of you stressed the number of units that your proposals would bring.
I haven't stressed a number of units on housing. I've talked about shelter because we're talking about how many people are unsheltered and need to be brought into emergency housing and shelter. But we're talking now about permanent housing, sometimes workforce housing in the affordable housing sector. So in terms of moving forward, I guess what I'll say is that we need to emphasize, we need to build more family-size housing, which is challenging for the financing, but we absolutely need to do that. And we also, I think, now that we have these vacancies, need to think about, is there a way that the city can help to buy down rents and also provide services so that we can actually place homeless people in some of these units? And it's complicated, right? But I'm not going to get into the details, but I think that that's something we should definitely be looking at. I think the mayor's proposal that I heard from his office in the Seattle Times article is basically, well, let's just wait till rents in the private market go up again, and then people will go into these units again.
I have a different question for you, but if you would
Sure,
like to respond.
my opponent's all over the map on housing policy. She just said at the other forum that the problem is the production of housing did not keep up with the demand. And I would actually agree with that. Under our administration, we've actually built 50,000 units. No mayor in our history has been able to achieve that. In the levy that you all helped me pass, or at least maybe your moms and dads did, we will build another 3,100. In my current budget, we have $350 million for affordable housing. I need to build a Seattle where you can live in, and our comp plan reflects an aggressive approach to make sure we have the inventory for you.
Mayor Harrell, you have said that the number of tents in our city has declined 80% since you took office. I've certainly noticed that in some places. But we also learned last week that the number of reports of encampments is way up this year. Which is it? How does this make sense?
Well, it makes sense. First of all, I was a technology lawyer. One reason why we're generating all these reports, because we want you to see it. We audit ourselves. The fact of the matter is that one fact we should be very proud of is that the people that are leaving shelter, 50% of them are getting into permanent supportive housing. That is a best practices. We have 19 tiny home villages. We have 2 sanctioned encampments. We will pay for people in Tukwila to adopt a model to where we will even have people there put people there if they have access to service, access to transit, if they're familiar with that area, and this is a workable solution for everyone. So we have removed encampments to the tune of 80%. That's the data. But you look at the encampments, you look at the shots fired, the crimes down. The fact is that 2,204 people in 2023 had accepted referral, around the similar number the next year. So we're doing a best practice to put people in permanent supportive housing with wraparound services, which again is much better than just sticking someone in a tent and hoping for the best. That is not a best practice, and that is not under our administration. We will not operate that way.
Mayor Harrell, as a graduate of Garfield High School, are you in favor for reinstating a security officer on its campus? And do you think it's a good idea?
On campus? Inside the building?
Yeah.
You from Garfield, brother?
No.
Oh, I thought you said from Garfield. Shoot, I thought you said I was.
I'm talking about Garfield, but.
Okay. So if the students want it, and I believe 70% of the students want it, if the principal wants it, I know he wants it, then we think that this would be a good relationship, so yes. However, I'm very willing to go, certainly not a gun and badge, an unarmed response. I want these kids safe. These lockdowns are absurd. So we want to make sure that we're doing what the community wants. I talked to the parents. I talked to Amar's Murphy Payne's dad and mom. He was killed. I talked to the mother of the young girl that was shot at the bus stop. I have an obligation to make sure they're safe. So I'm hoping the school district, who governs that issue, by the way, it's their decision, will let us try a pilot to make sure that I have officers that the people trust. I went to Garfield, and we had an officer inside the building, and it was a mentor of mine and a friend. So I think there are certain officers that have that skill set. I think it's a win-win, because at the end of the day, I don't want any of our kids harmed.
Now, Ms. Wilson, are you in favor of putting in a school engagement officer?
This is a great question, and what I am concerned about is my understanding from talking with gun violence experts and folks at the Alliance for Gun Responsibility is that the research does not support the notion that armed officers in schools lead to increased safety, and that it may actually be harmful, especially for minority students. So that gives me pause. At the same time, it is very important, obviously, what students feel, what parents feel, what administrators feel, and so I think there needs to be, and I understand that there is, right, a conversation going on about that. And that conversation, I think, is not just about surveying people and seeing what they think, because we'll come in with, if you're afraid, right, there's a gut reaction, right, I want someone there to protect me. But I think there needs to be a conversation that also is a learning conversation where we're hearing people's concerns and also trying to make known, right, like what does the research say? And so yeah, I mean, I'm skeptical of the idea, but I'm also open to it if that conversation leads to that being the best. And it's not all or nothing, right? So I think as the mayor said, I agree with this, right? It's not necessarily, it has to be an armed cop, right? Maybe there's something in the middle where you're getting that official presence and sense of safety, but without the harm.
Okay, speaking of policing, go ahead.
I don't even understand that answer. Am I the only one? I support the officers. I had a minority kid that went to Garfield. I had a minority kid that went to Cleveland. They support it. I'm talking to the students. They support it. So it's my job to make sure I listen to the students. And so I support it. And an executive has to be clear in your decision. You deserve that. And this election is less than 30 days away, and that's why I said I don't understand if my opponent's for it or against it, and that's why I try to answer these questions. I'm a lot of things, but I'm not disingenuous or I'm not unauthentic, so I will give you a straight answer. I'll give you a straight answer, yes or no on some of these questions. And I think that's what people want, a yes or no.
Okay, let's keep talking about policing. The City Council recently granted authority for police to use less lethal force for crowd control, which was needed to end the consent decree. A mayor, in order for that to happen, would need to declare a civil emergency. This question is for you, Mayor. This was heavily debated, as a lot of people in this room know, in the summer of 2020 with the Chaz and Chop down the street. So the question, Mayor, is can you define what a situation looks like where you would declare the authorization of less lethal force?
Where I declare the authorization of less lethal force. Yes, dangerous, guns in play, violence, people's lives are in jeopardy. I mean, that would trigger a response, but I have to stay in my lane. I have to defer to the chief of police, who holds a PhD, and he has another PhD who's a criminologist, and I have to rely on their decision. I'm not a police officer. I know what chaos looks like, so I have to work closely with them, and to some extent, that's why I push back on legislation where I have to make certain decisions, because I have to defer often to the criminologists and the police command staff. But I know what violence looks like, so that would sort of trigger that kind of response.
I mean, I'll just say that I think maybe the mayor needs to start paying closer attention to the decisions that his police chief is making. We just got the news this week that Mike Tejan has been promoted to captain leader of the East Precinct. This is someone who has multiple troubling incidents on his record, including incidents that evince a lack of respect for the LGBTQ+ community. Someone who perhaps should not even be a sworn officer, let alone a captain, let alone in charge of the East Precinct. So I think that we need a little bit more oversight of the decisions that our police chief is making.
I went a little bit off the format we have here because I do have a question about policing for you, and it's specifically about funding. You told Publicola November 2nd of 2020 in discussions about the police budget and what was called the solidarity budget, and I'm quoting straight from Publicola, "We want to move towards a future entirely without SPD. We want to focus energy elsewhere." Is there still a future in this city without SPD?
Absolutely not, at least not in any foreseeable time frame, right? My opponent has been in debate after debate talking about how I want to defund the police, and I want to make very clear, I know that my opponent desperately wishes that he was running against someone who wants to defund the police, but that is not the case. I believe that we need a police department that is adequately staffed, that is responsive, and that is accountable to the communities that it served. And as mayor, I will continue to hire officers, and I will also push aggressively to civilianize roles that armed police do not need to be performing so that we can use our police resources effectively and our police can focus on policing and on investigating serious crimes.
Katie, you have said many times that you are a Democrat and a socialist, but not socialist in the way of former Seattle City Council member Shama Sawant. All of the terms can be a little dizzying. Can you help folks this evening determine the kind of politician that you are by answering a few quick yes/no? And I mean yes/no. Yes or no? Do you favor decriminalizing prostitution?
I can't qualify that. I mean, yes with qualifications. And I'm not sure that's relevant to the question of my political labels.
Well,
they are.
just work with me here. Just work with me here. It's okay. It's okay. Just work with me here. We're just running through a few issues, and we'll do the same with the mayor.
Okay.
Do you favor decriminalizing prostitution?
Yes with qualifications.
Yes with qualifications. Okay. Do you favor a $30 minimum wage within 5 years?
Within 5 years?
Our current one.
Probably not. I mean, that's not something that I've announced as part of my platform.
Do you favor a rent freeze?
Not a rent freeze, no.
Is there another
I mean,
word?
it's not. Well, it's
Is there
not,
another word for it?
I support rent stabilization, and I think that the devil's in the details in terms of how we design a policy like that, and we're actually not allowed to in Seattle according to state law. But yes, I certainly support, if we could do it locally and certainly statewide, rent stabilization policy, and there's lots of kind of details about how you would do that. But yeah.
I'm gonna break format here a little bit, and we'll get to your question in 1 second. Mayor Harrell, the same list. Do you support, yes, no, decriminalizing prostitution?
Not by law. We realize they're victims most of the time themselves. We're not enforcing it against them. But in terms of decriminalizing it, I don't think the state or the city is doing that.
Do you support a $30 minimum wage within 5 years?
Is that where it would go naturally?
No,
30
I
years?
looked that up.
Not
That's
in 5
interesting.
years. Not in 5
Right now, we're at 2076. Next year,
I would
goes up
say,
to
based on what I know about the matrix, no. I would stick with what we're doing at this point.
Okay. What about freezing rents?
No, I don't think we have the authority to do that, by the way.
Okay. Mayor Harrell, there was just a vote yesterday approving the decision to locate a new crisis care center down the street from Seattle University at the Polyclinic. Do you plan to let it move forward as proposed? And if so, what specific measures or reinforcements will the city put in place to support it?
Yes, so number one, it's a county decision. And the conditions that I placed on supporting it from a mayor's standpoint were very clear. And if those conditions are met, I would support it. Number one, it has to be safe for everyone, for people we're trying to rebuild from an economic development, the stores, the small businesses, so we don't want increased criminal activity around the surroundings. We want to make sure that we sign what we call a good neighbor agreement, so they actually know exactly what cleanliness in terms of trash and pickup and everything else looks like in that area. So we want to make sure that everything in this crisis care center, which by the way we have to have, because we have to give people treatment. So yes, this is a good thing, just like the Orca Center and the Star Center that we're investing in. But we also want to make sure there's a school close by, there's small businesses struggling. And so if the good neighbor agreement is put in place with the right security, yes, we'll move forward.
All right. Now, Ms. Wilson, you've talked about supporting people in crisis. This new facility will serve individuals struggling with drug and alcohol addiction, but it's located right across the street from a brewery, a hotel, and Seattle University. As mayor, how would you ensure the safety and security of the surrounding community while still supporting those in need?
Yeah, I definitely support this center. I do think that the process of public outreach leading up to its announcement was lacking, and I think that's part of why there's been intense pushback from some in the neighborhood, because there wasn't that process that kind of brought people along. And with due respect, I think the conditions that the mayor's put on it are not entirely responsive to the concerns that I've heard from folks in the neighborhood. I did a walk around Capitol Hill with some neighborhood business leaders and property owners, and I've talked with folks who work at some of the businesses there. So the concerns that I've heard, number one is about the kind of environment that we would be discharging people out into from that center, and we have some serious public safety issues on Capitol Hill and drug issues. And also with kind of the follow-up, right? So once someone is discharged from that center, what do we have for them in the way of longer-term case management, care, shelter, housing? So those are the concerns that I've heard, and I'm not sure that those have been adequately addressed. I think that we need to work on that, but absolutely support the center.
All right, let's talk about transportation. Katie, this is something that should be in your wheelhouse as the founder of Transit Riders Union. That used to be the most important issue in this city. There's a nice bus rapid transit line that goes right here down Madison past Seattle University that people take directly downtown. But you would also hold a seat on the Sound Transit Board, and that's a big issue for a lot of people in the city of Seattle right now about the potential for an alteration of the West Seattle or Ballard lines. Yeah. There's a massive shortfall. How do you fill it? How do you fix it?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question, and I'm really looking forward, if I'm successful in this race, to serving on the Sound Transit Board and also being able to do everything that I can from the mayor's office to expedite Sound Transit projects, to really have the city be a leader in the planning and development. And we have a $40 billion shortfall, right? That's a huge shortfall, and it's going to force some really tough decisions. I do think that there's a possibility that we go for more funding, whether that's at the state level. We also have a monorail tax authority in Seattle that with state legislature permission could potentially be repurposed. But as it is, there are tough decisions in the works, right, about whether we can complete both of those lines to their full extent. I know there's also been a proposal about, from Councilmember Balducci, about whether we actually need a second downtown tunnel. Interesting, I'm a little cautious about that because I think we really do need that capacity if we're going to build the system out to its full extent. But I will say, I mean, this is not going to save us all those billions of dollars, but there's a lot more that can be done from the mayor's office at the city to improve the delivery of Sound Transit projects. We have not gone nearly as far as we could at expediting permitting and all that kind of process, and also looking at using the city's right-of-way instead of just trying to cobble together private property, which ends up taking much, much longer. So there's a lot that I would like to do to try to help, and yes, it is just a huge shortfall and a big challenge ahead.
A lot of overruns, Mayor. How do you fix it?
Well, number one, I've been a vocal advocate and a leader, making sure that, yes, the spine from Everett to Tacoma will be intact, but West Seattle and Ballard, the voters voted for them to have their light rail, and we should have it. So what we're doing is I first reorganized our city to be able to deliver services to the project itself at Sound Transit efficiently. We took 50 of the smartest engineer types and we put them together in a civics project group to make sure that permits are expedited. When we look at land use, that we are doing it in the best way. And we'll show the other cities and the counties how a city, the largest city, can do it smartly. So that will save us hundreds of millions of dollars the way we'll go about doing that, number one. Number two is you're going to see me even tomorrow at the meeting advance some discussion on looking at West Seattle. And we have to look at, for example, I'm studying the Avalon station as an example to see are there some savings that could be done there. So I will direct staff to make sure we're saving money. Make no mistake about this, that we deserve light rail. And these cost overruns, we're going to try to get federal money and state help. This is the largest light rail project in the country. And we're doing everything humanly possible. We hired the smartest people, the smartest engineers to make sure we save this money. And I think my colleagues on my left and right, north and south, understand that.
All right, I'm going to ask you a question about leadership because it has been raised by both of you in this campaign. And Katie, I want to ask you specifically because you have brought up the hiring of the former police chief, Adrian Diaz. So I think it raises questions about who you may hire at City Hall. Former City Councilmember Tammy Morales has been backing you at your campaign events. Former mayoral candidate Joe Mallahan has endorsed you, and there's a lot of talks behind the scenes at City Hall that you are prepared to hire former City Council President Lorena Gonzalez, who is also a former mayoral candidate. I can tell by your reaction you may disagree with that, but can you say here tonight whether you are prepared to hire Morales, Malahan, or Gonzalez as a deputy mayor?
I can say none of those things. And I had no clue that rumors were going on about any of those people and potential hires. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say very much about my transition process because some things are going on behind the scenes now that I'm not at liberty to disclose. But I will say that since I did so well in the primary, got 51% of the vote. Since that day, we have begun a kind of pre-transition planning process, and I've been having a lot of conversations with folks who have deep experience at City Hall, who've worked for multiple mayoral administrations, other government experience, management experience, and I'm, again, really excited about the prospects of assembling a team. I'm not prepared to name individuals yet. We're actually starting to vet some candidates for a few of those top positions. But yeah, no, I certainly have not committed to hiring any of the people that you name, and actually have not committed to hiring any particular individuals yet, although there are a lot of, I think, really exciting names on the lists.
Mayor, this is an issue, again, because of your handpicked police chief, Adrian Diaz, who you hired and have since fired, and it's prompted lawsuits and legal filings. You had a deputy mayor accuse you of running a boys' club. So how will the next 4 years be any different?
Yeah, so let's level set. Number one, the Chief Diaz, who I did terminate for dishonesty, he was the chief when I was mayor, became mayor, and he was produced to me on a national search. And I don't think a mayor in recent history has had to terminate a police chief, so that decision was not made lightly, but it's one that I own. My opponent, I don't think, has ever hired anyone, and when you get into a hiring situation, you make tough decisions. The senior deputy mayor was my niece, and her father, my brother, died of cancer a few years ago, and we listened to her feedback. Perhaps that was her perspective. The fact is I have had the lowest turnover on my executive team in the last 30 years. The fact is I have the most diverse executive team, more women and more people of color on an executive team. And you could look at the same way in my cabinet, that we hire very aggressively. When we started the care department, I was very intentional that we have Chief Amy Barton heading that. So I think we model practicing diversity and inclusion.
Mayor,
and again,
we are running out of
we try to get better in our decisions.
We want to get in one more question from Diego, and take it away, because we're running out of time to both of you.
Ms. Wilson, the idea of government-owned grocery stores, is that something you support, and how exactly do they work?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and this has come up in the context especially of the Lake City Fred Meyer closure and the grocery desert and pharmacy desert that are opening up in that neighborhood as a result. I was just up in Lake City a couple days ago and talking with small business owners, talking with neighborhood leaders, folks at the North Seattle Helpline up there who are very concerned about the food desert. And I'll say that there's a sense of outrage at Kroger leaving, because it's definitely a place that can absolutely support a grocery store. It's a very busy neighborhood. And there's also keen interest in what the city could potentially do there. And not just that spot, but there's also a Bartell's that's now vacant. And so there's a lot of interest in the idea of the city purchasing or leasing that property and setting up some kind of mercado or market. And I think that, publicly owned grocery store, public option grocery store, which can be a public-private partnership, this is not some kind of off-the-wall idea, right? Atlanta just opened one. Every military base in the country has a publicly owned grocery store. St. Paul has one. So there's a lot of precedent for this. And I think it's a really interesting idea. UFCW 3000, the largest private sector union in the state, which represents grocery workers, is also very interested, and their extensive knowledge of the grocery industry, I think, makes this even more feasible. So I think it's worth considering for that neighborhood, potentially others. I also support the things that the mayor has announced in terms of expansion of Fresh Bucks and the farmers market up there. I am concerned that the funding he's allocated for that is one time, so that's setting up a fiscal cliff for the next mayor in the next budget cycle.
Mayor Harrell, do you think that's a good idea? And how do you plan on dealing with Seattle's food deserts?
So, we've invested over $40 million in food insecurity, and we amended our comprehensive plan to make sure that we can encourage and incentivize and pay for small grocers to be on corners. The fact is, this municipally owned grocery store has been around for years. Chicago started and thought about it in 2022 and backed out. it doesn't work very well. We don't have the supply chain power to buy. We can't compete against some of the private markets. So you're going to get, that's why cities back out of. You see them closing down all the time. Not a bad idea, it's just unproven, and sometimes it loses. So we think the smarter approach are to get as many corner stores involved. And also, if you look at the food insecurity, we are leading the country in terms of how we are addressing food insecurity. We had 4,000 people on the Fresh Bucks list. Now we'll take them off the waiting list. 16,000 people to get food benefits. So we're doing everything possible to address food insecurity.
And we're going to have to leave it right there. That is all we have time for. Big thanks to Mayor Harrell. Big thanks to you, Ms. Wilson. Thanks to our audience. Well behaved, well behaved. And thanks to the TV audience, and good night. Thanks.